The morgue was silent except for the hum of refrigeration units and the occasional buzz of fluorescent lights. Mark, a veteran night shift security guard, slouched in his chair, scrolling through the surveillance feeds. It was another uneventful shift, until he rewound a clip from an hour earlier. In the grainy black and white footage, the sheet covering one of the corpses shifted. The fabric slid down just enough to reveal the face of a woman, her skin pale and waxy under the morgue's harsh lighting. Then, impossibly, her arm lifted. Her fingers twitched a slow, deliberate wave, before her hand dropped back onto the stainless steel table. The entire movement lasted less than 3 seconds. Mark leaned closer, his pulse quickening. He played it again, and again. The wave didn't change. His throat went dry as he checked the timestamp, 3:17 a.m. The time of death listed on her tag was 11:45 p.m. He forced a laugh, rubbing his eyes. Glitch, he muttered, has to be. But the word tasted hollow. The unease clung to him like a second skin. Later, when Dr. Lena arrived for her early morning rounds, Mark mentioned it offhand. Weird thing on camera 4, might need recalibrating. She barely glanced up from her clipboard. Probably just a static discharge. Happens sometimes. Mark nodded, but he couldn't shake the image. The woman's face, empty-eyed, lips slightly parted, flashed in his mind. The paperwork identified her as a Jane Doe brought in after a hit and run. No family, no history. Just another nameless body in the cold room. Yet as he stared at her still form under the sheet, he swore the air around her stretcher was colder than the rest of the room. And for a fleeting moment, he imagined her fingers twitching again, waiting. Mark's hands trembled as he rewound the surveillance footage, his breath shallow. The timestamp showed 2:03 a.m., the same time he'd spotted the strange movement earlier. The grainy black and white image of the morgue's storage room flickered on the monitor. The woman's body lay motionless on the steel table, just as it should. Then, as if on cue, her arm lifted, fingers curling in a slow, deliberate wave. A cold knot tightened in Mark's stomach when her lips twitched into a faint smile before her body settled back into stillness. He shot up from his chair, knocking over his coffee. Heart hammering, he grabbed his flashlight and hurried to the morgue. The fluorescing lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows. He yanked open the drawer where the woman's body should be. And there she was, pale and lifeless, her arms neatly folded. No movement, no smile. Breathing hard, Mark called Lena. She arrived minutes later, still buttoning her lab coat. "You're seeing things," she said, shining her own flashlight over the corpse. "No way that happened." When he insisted, she sighed. "You've been pulling doubles all week. It's a glitch or your brain filling in blanks." But Mark knew. He'd seen it twice now. Back in the surveillance room, he zoomed in on the footage. There, frame by frame, the undeniable truth, the woman's hand lifted, her fingers flexing, and that smile, so subtle, so wrong. Lena patted his shoulder. "Get some rest." He barely heard her. On the monitor, the frozen image of the waving corpse stared back at him. Something about it felt inviting, as if she was waiting for him to wave back. He shoved the thought away. But in the silence of the empty morgue, the echoes of his own breathing sounded like whispered laughter. Mark's breath fogged in the frigid air as he rewound the surveillance footage for the third time, his fingers trembling on the keyboard. The timestamp read 3:17 a.m., and there she was, the unidentified woman, her pale limbs stiff yet moving with unnatural fluidity as she sat upright on the slab. The camera captured her turning her head toward the lens, her hollow eyes locking onto it before she swung her legs over the edge and stood. She took a step forward, then another, before disappearing off screen. The door at the end of the room never opened. She simply vanished. Heart pounding, Mark rushed to the morgue, the sterile white lights flickering above him. The slab where the woman had lain was empty, the sheet neatly folded at the foot, as if she'd made her bed before leaving. He checked every drawer, every corner, even the supply closets, but there was no sign of her. The air grew colder with each passing second, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Then, beneath the hum of the refrigeration units, he heard it. A whisper, faint but unmistakable, threading through the silence like a cold finger down his spine. Dr. Lena arrived moments later, her professional skepticism dissolving as she saw the empty slab. "You're sure you checked everywhere?" she asked, her voice tight. Mark nodded, his throat dry. Together they combed the morgue again, but the woman was gone. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of hushed voices speaking in a language neither of them understood. Lena's hand brushed against the camera lens as they reviewed the footage once more. And then she froze. The screen flickered, and for a fraction of a second, the woman's face filled the monitor, her lips curling into a smile before the image returned to normal. The temperature plummeted. The whispers became words. "Find us." Lena's fingers trembled as she flipped through the brittle pages of the journal she'd found in the woman's belongings. The entries were eerily precise, detailing visions of her own demise weeks before the hit and run. The final page, dated the day of her death, sent a jolt down Lena's spine. "They will see me wave goodbye." Her breath hitched. This wasn't just a coincidence, it was a message. Mark, meanwhile, had been obsessively reviewing the footage again, frame by frame. His stomach twisted as he noticed something new: smudges on the camera lens. But when he leaned closer, his blood ran cold. The marks weren't on the outside, they were inside the monitor, as if someone had pressed their hands against the glass from within the screen itself. He recoiled, knocking over his coffee. The liquid pooled darkly across the desk, reflecting the flickering glow of the surveillance feed. Lena rushed in, journal in hand, her face pale. She knew, she whispered. She knew she was going to die, and she knew we'd see her. Mark swallowed hard, pointing to the monitor. That's not all. Something's inside the system. It's watching us back. A sudden gust of cold air swept through the room, though the vents were silent. The whispers returned, faint but unmistakable, threading through the hum of the fluorescent lights. Lena's grip on the journal tightened. "We need to get out of here," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, the lights dimmed. The surveillance screens flickered, and for a split second, the woman's face filled every display. Her smile widening, her fingers curling in another slow, deliberate wave. The morgue's fluorescent light sputtered, casting erratic shadows across the sterile white walls. Mark's breath hitched as he stared at the bank of monitors, each screen flickering like a dying pulse. There she was again. The woman from the footage, her pale face reflected in every display, her hand raised in that same slow, deliberate wave. His stomach twisted. She wasn't just in the recordings anymore, she was in the screens themselves, her hollow eyes tracking his every move. He spun around, searching for Lena, but her chair sat empty, her half-finished coffee still steaming. "Lena," he called, his voice cracking. No response. The air grew thick, the temperature plummeting as if the morgue had become a freezer. Then came the whispers, soft, insistent, crowding in from the corners of the room. He turned back to the monitors, his blood turning to ice. The footage had changed. It showed Lena standing by the drawers, her back to the camera, unaware of the shadowy hands slithering from the open slots. They seized her wrists, her ankles, yanking her into the darkness. Her mouth opened in a soundless scream before the drawer slammed shut behind her. Mark's hands trembled as he fumbled for his radio, but static hissed back at him. The woman's voice slithered through the speakers, barely more than a whisper but deafening in the silence. "Join us." He staggered back, knocking over a tray of instruments. The clatter echoed like a gunshot. On the monitors, the drawers began opening one by one, each revealing nothing but blackness inside. The whispering grew louder, a chorus of voices now all repeating the same two words. Then, the lights died completely. In the pitch black, Mark felt something brush against his arm, cold, skeletal fingers curling around his wrist. He screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. When the lights flickered back on, Lena's drawer was open again. Empty, and on the nearest monitor the woman smiled, her lips parting to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. "Soon," she mouthed. The screen went black. Mark's breath came in ragged gasps as he twisted the doorknob, desperation turning his fingers numb. The exit refused to budge, as though welded shut. He pounded on the door, his shout swallowed by the oppressive silence of the morgue. The flickering lights cast jagged shadows, and the air thickened with a creeping cold that seeped into his bones. He whipped around, scanning the room for another way out, only to freeze when the surveillance monitor flickered to life. The woman's face filled the screen, her hollow eyes locking onto his. Her lips parted, mouthing words he couldn't hear, but the meaning slithered into his mind anyway. "You can't leave." Emma's stomach dropped, the figures turned toward her, their smiles widening impossibly, their teeth jagged and blackened. Staggering back, Emma's mind raced. When the screen flickered back on, Mark's blood turned to ice. There he stood, not in the flesh, but reflected in the monitor beside the woman, his limbs stiff. His hand lifting in the same unnatural wave he'd seen her perform nights before. His reflection didn't blink, didn't breathe. A whisper brushed against his ear, "Too close. Join us." Mark's body moved against his will. His arms rose, fingers twitching into that same mechanical gesture. His reflection grinned as the woman's hand closed around his wrist, her touch like frozen iron. The screen flared white, then black, silence. Then, from the shadows, the soft sound of a drawer sliding shut. The new guard, Jason, yawned as he scrolled through hours of uneventful surveillance footage from the previous night. The morgue was quiet, the hum of refrigerated drawers the only sound breaking the silence. He chuckled to himself, thinking how paranoid the last guy, Mark, had been, always jumping at shadows. The guy had quit abruptly, along with Dr. Lena, leaving no notice. Strange, but not his problem. As Jason fast-forwarded through the recordings, he noted the time-stamps, empty hallways, motionless slabs, the occasional flicker of a faulty bulb. Routine stuff. Then, just as he was about to close the feed, the final frame caught his eye. He rewound, his finger hovering over the keyboard. There it was, a single, frozen image at the end of the recording. Mark and Lena lay on adjacent slabs, their skin pale and waxy eyes milky white. Their arms were raised in unison, hands waving stiffly, like puppets on strings. At the edge of the frame, the unidentified woman stood, her grin stretching too wide, her hollow eyes fixed on the camera. Jason's breath hitched. He slammed the keyboard, backing away as the screen abruptly cut to black. The room temperature plummeted, his breath forming mist in the air. A soft rustling came from behind him, the sound of fabric sliding against metal. His head swiveled toward the rows of body drawers, his pulse roaring in his ears. One of them was slightly ajar. He took a trembling step forward, then froze. From the darkness within the drawer, a hand emerged, pale, lifeless, fingers curling in a slow, deliberate wave. The woman's voice, impossibly close, whispered, "Welcome to the night shift." The drawer slammed shut, the lights went out. Then, silence.